So Close by Huynh Quang Nhuong. My grandmother was very fond of cookies made of banana, egg, and coconut. So my mother and I always stopped at Mrs. Hong's house to buy these cookies for her on our way back from the marketplace. My mother also liked to see Mrs. Hong because they had been very good friends since grade school days. While my mother talked with her friend, I talked with Mrs. Hong's daughter, Lon. Most of the time, Lon asked me about my older sister, who was married to a teacher and lived in a nearby town. Lon too was going to get married to a young man living next door, Trung. Trung and Lon had been inseparable playmates until the day tradition did not allow them to be alone together anymore. Besides, I think they felt a little shy with each other after realizing that they were man and woman. Lon was a lively, pretty girl who attracted the attention of all the young men of our hamlet. Trung was a skillful fisherman who successfully piled his trade on the river in front of their house. Whenever Lon's mother found a big fish in her kitchen windowsill, she would smile to herself. Finally, she decided that Trung was a fine young man and would make a good husband for her daughter. Trung's mother, who did not like the idea of her son giving a good fish away, but she liked the cookies Lan brought her from time to time. Besides, the girl was helpful. Whenever she was not busy at her own house, Lan would come over in the evening and help Trung's mother repair her son's fishing nets. Trung was happiest when Lan was helping his mother. They did not talk to each other, but they could look at each other when his mother was busy with her work. Each time Lon went home, Chung looked at the chair Lon had just left and secretly wished that nobody would move it. One day, when Chung's mother heard her son call Lon's name in his sleep, she decided it was time to speak to the girl's mother about marriage. Lon's mother agreed they should be married and even waived the custom whereby the bridegroom has to give the bride's family a fat hog, 6 chickens, 6 ducks, 3 bottles of wine, and 30 kilos of fine rice, for the two families had known each other for a long time and they were good neighbors. The two widowed mothers quickly set the date for the engagement announcement and for the wedding ceremony. Since their decision was immediately made known to relatives and friends, Chung and Lon could now see each other often. One day, as Chung helped Lan to plant a mango tree behind her house, he asked her, "Have you ever looked at those dainty town boys who pass by your house all the time?" Instead of answering Chung, Lan poked a hard finger at his ribs and laughed. And then she said, "They're not bad looking at all, so don't bother about them. Besides, my mother said that in the darkness, everybody looks the same." To a shy young man like Chung, the remark was quite bold, but he was very pleased and happy. At last, it was the day of their wedding. Friends and relatives arrived early in the morning to help them celebrate. They brought gifts of ducks, chickens, baskets filled with fruit, rice wine, and colorful fabrics. Even though the two houses were next to each other, the two mothers observed all the proper wedding day traditions. First, Chung and his friends and relatives came to Lon's house. Lon and he prayed at their ancestors' altars and asked for their blessing. Then they joined everyone for a luncheon. After lunch, there was a farewell ceremony for the bride. Lon stepped out of her house and joined the greeting party that was to accompany her to Chung's home. Tradition called for her to cry and to express her sorrow at leaving her parents behind and forever becoming the daughter of the husband's family. In some villages, the bride was even supposed to cling so tightly to her mother that it would take several friends to pull her away from her home. But instead of crying, Lon smiled. She asked herself, why would she cry? The two houses were separated only by a garden. She could run home and see her mother anytime she wanted to. So Lon willingly followed Chung and prayed at his ancestors' altars before joining everyone at the big welcome dinner at Chung's house, and then at that ended the day's celebrations. Later in the evening of the wedding night, Lon went to a river to take a bath. Because crocodiles infested the river, people of our hamlet who lived along the riverbank chopped down trees and put them in the river to form barriers and protect places where they washed their clothes, did their dishes, or took a bath. This evening, a willy crocodile had avoided the barrier by crawling up the riverbank and sneaked up behind Lon. The crocodile grabbed her and went back to the river by the same route it had come. Trung became worried when Lon did not return. He went to the place where she was supposed to bathe, only to find that her clothes were there, yet she had disappeared. Panic stricken, he yelled for his relatives. They all rushed to the river bank with lighted torches. In the flickering light, they found traces of water and crocodile claw prints on the wet soil. Now they knew a crocodile had grabbed the young bride and dragged her into the river. Since no one could do anything for the girl, all of Trung's relatives returned to the house, urging the bridegroom to do the same. But the young man refused to leave the place. He just stood there crying and staring at the clothes of his bride. Suddenly, the wind brought him the sound of Lon calling his name. He was very frightened, for according to an old belief, a crocodile's victim must lure a new victim to his master. If not, the first victim's soul must stay with the beast forever. Trung rushed back to his house and woke up all his relatives. Nobody doubted that he thought he heard her call, but they all believed that he was the victim of a hallucination. Everyone pleaded with him and tried to convince him that nobody could survive when snapped up by a crocodile and dragged into a river to be drowned and eaten by the animal. The young man brushed aside all their arguments and rushed back to the river. Once again, he heard the voice of his bride in the wind calling his name. And again, he rushed back and woke up his relatives. Again, they tried to persuade him that it was a hallucination, although some of the old folks suggested that maybe the ghost of the young girl was having a dance and a sing to placate the angry crocodile because she failed to bring in a new victim. No one could persuade Trung to stay inside. His friends wanted to go back to the river with him, but he said no. He resented them for not believing him that there were desperate cries of the wind. Trung stood in the front of the deep river alone in the darkness. He listened to the sound of the wind and clutched the clothes Lon had left behind. The wind became stronger and stronger and often changed direction as the night progressed. But he didn't hear any more calls. Still, he had no doubt that the voice he had heard earlier was absolutely real. Then at dawn, when the wind died down, he again heard, very clearly, Lon call him for help. Her voice came from an island about 600 meters away. Trung wept and prayed. You were a good girl when you were alive. Now be a good soul. Please protect me so I can find a way to kill the beast in order to free you from its spell and avenge your tragic death. Suddenly, while wiping away his tears, he saw a little tree moving on the island. The tree was jumping up and down. He squinted to see better. The tree had two hands that were waving at him, and it was calling his name. Trung became hysterical and yelled for help. He woke up all his relatives and they rushed to his side again. At first, they thought that Trung had become stark mad. They tried to lead him back to his house, but he fiercely resisted their attempt. He talked to them incoherently and pointed his finger at a strange tree on the island. Finally, his relatives saw the waving tree. They quickly put a small boat in the river, and Trung got in the boat along with two other men. They paddled to the island and discovered that the tree was, in fact, Lon. She had covered herself with leaves because she had no clothes on. At first, nobody knew what had really happened because Lon clung to Trung and cried and cried. And finally, when Lon could talk, they pieced together the story. Lon had fainted when the crocodile snapped her up. Had she not fainted, the crocodile surely would have drowned her before carrying her off to the island. Lon didn't know how many times the crocodile had tossed her into the air and smashed her against the ground, but at one point, while being tossed in the air and falling back into the crocodile's jaw, she regained consciousness. The crocodile smashed her against the ground a few more times, but Lon played dead. Luckily, the crocodile became thirsty and returned to the river to drink. At that moment, Lon got up and ran to a nearby tree and climbed up it. The tree was very small. Lon stayed very still, for fear that the snorting, angry crocodile roaming around trying to catch her again would find her and shake her out of the tree. Lon stayed in this frozen position for a long time until the crocodile gave up searching for her and went back to the river. Then she started calling Trung to come rescue her. Lon's body was covered with bruises, for crocodiles often soften up big prey before swallowing it. They'll smash it against the ground or against a tree or keep tossing it into the air. But fortunately, Lon had no broken bones or serious cuts. It was possible that the crocodile was very old and had lost most of its teeth. Nevertheless, the older the crocodile, the more intelligent it usually was. That's how it knew to avoid the log barrier in the river and to snap up the girl from behind. Chung carried his exhausted bride into the boat and paddled home. Lon slept for hours and hours. At times, she would sit up with a start and cry out for help. But within 3 days, she was almost completely recovered. Lon's mother and Chong's mother decided to celebrate their children's wedding a second time because Lon had come back from the dead. All their friends came to sing to the happy couple. At midnight, at the end of the last serenade, the wedding night, the bride and the bridegroom were supposed to open the windows of their room to thank the minstrels, but Lon and Chong kept the windows closed. Perhaps they were too tired or too busy to open it. The serenade party left good humoredly, saying, "One could do well, only one thing at a time."